Okay, thus begins analysis of ZvP. One of the most common ways for Protoss to open is by shading adepts in all of your bases. We'll think about how to open in a way that you can identify that they're going for lots of adepts, and then how to respond defensively, and then how to be aggressive after you've cleaned up most of the adepts. So my go-to build order in ZvP is Hatch Gas Pool. I do this build pretty much in every matchup, but adapt it a little bit depending on what I'm faced with. So that's 17 hatch, and then an 18 gas rallied from the egg state, and then a 17 pool right after that. This map in particular, at first I thought of it as being bad for ling drops, but if you do a little work and maybe think about an ideal way to drop the lings, they have this choke to worry about. This ramp gets access to their natural and to their third base. These rocks could be opened up, but 8 lings for a dropper lord aren't really going to want to go that way. So I figured, why not do the ling drop over here, so you can leap over these rocks and then take this back alleyway into their base. If you go ling speed with your first 100 gas with this build, pull off of gas, drop the Evo chamber when you have 50% ling speed, the 8 lings that you put in the Protoss space will force them to disclose what they're working with. If they're opening Oracle, they'll use the Oracle to fight the lings. If they're opening Adept, they'll use the Adept to fight those lings. So I made 2 lings early on to push the probe off of my third hatch, just so I can macro up correctly. And then I make about 8 to 10 lings. 8 to 10 is a good amount to be able to beat 2 adepts that are shaded across the map early on, and it also fits nicely into a single Overlord drop. So I'm not taking an upgrade here. The Evo chamber is purely for this drop research. I load into the Overlord. Behind this, I'm droning. So production tab, I have a Roach Warren and a second gas. I started these when I hit 2 base mineral saturation. Whenever you're doing some harassment, you want your macro task at home to be as simple as possible. So just hatch larva drone is my task at home while I'm microing this on the offense. The opponent's opener is 3 gateways of Adept. 3 gateways can be a pretty big threat. If they go for 2 gateways and a third base that's like a greedy opener, this is sort of a solid / aggressive opener where they can put a decent amount of adepts into the game and also be safe if someone's aggressive against them. So with these lings, I see, all right, here there are no gases, so I can rule out like Stargate play, I can rule out Immortal Sentry all in with a bunch of sentries, and then right here I see already 6 adepts. That's kind of a high count. Adepts can be pretty scary if they pool up a large number, and you can't really get a good surround on them with lings. Their follow-up is a Dark Shrine. If you see adepts and they're attacking pretty hard with the Resonating Glaives upgrade, Dark Shrine is only 1 tech structure away. So with this adept count, I can basically say the first warp gate cycle is not going to be DTs, but DTs are an option later on. So I have some lings, and then now I'm making 6 more lings just to start getting ready to absorb the wave of attack the opponent is going to leverage against me. I'm also adding 1 spine per base. These spines are a greater threat by the AI to adepts than drones are. Adepts should be looking to focus down your drones when they shade into your bases. If they don't have any spines in those bases, they can just A-move, and the adepts will really easily kill all the workers. If you have a spine, for 1, you're trading really efficiently with the adepts, and for 2, you're kind of pulling some of the aggression off of the drones, and they have to micro it harder. So that spine's getting some work done. I'm using lings here to defend this. So notice the ling is a unit that is countered by the adept, but in this particular stage of the game, like right when Warp Gate research finishes, it isn't really a logical time to build roaches. Roaches without roach speed are so slow that you're not really going to be able to chase these adepts down. Lings can clean them up, and with the assistance of some spines and some queens, you can just clear out your bases and then get into some roach production. If the opponent, say, went for a warp prism and a lot more gates, like if they didn't take a third and they went up to 5 to 7 gateways of Adept, you would want to eventually make roaches against that, just because the adept count would be so high. So now I feel pretty safe. I'm going to drone up some more. I'm adding 1 spore per base. I forgot to build a spore at this base, so I say, oh goodness, I need to pull these workers away. My next gas spending after the Overlord drop was lair, so I do have the ability to make overseers. I make an overseer at this base, and then when the DTs come in, a lot of times they'll try and focus a spore. In their vision, like in the Protoss player's vision, he knows that there's a spore in my base, so he's trying to right-click that. The drones are blocking them, and it's generally better to lose a couple workers fighting the DT with the spine than it is to lose the spore and then lose the base. So I kind of chase these away and then fall back to the stealth detection. I have 37 workers mining at this base, which is incredibly inefficient, but it's better to have a small window of mining inefficiency and then fix your saturation than it is to just leave your workers there to be sliced up by the DTs. Meanwhile, I was breaking the rocks here with some speedlings. These speedlings aren't really going to do that much against the DT, so I figured why not make some more progress to get to the Protoss side of things. This is a really nice kind of attack path. If you have this ramp as a potential threat and this ramp as a potential threat, you have 2 areas where they have to deal with you. I'm massing roaches now, so I'm going to have roach speed, I'm going to have ranged attack upgrade, and if the opponent goes for many adepts and they go for DTs, all of that like set of expenses cuts into their immortal count, which means roaches are going to be better. Roaches are a direct counter to the adept in a straight-on fight, and they do pretty well against DTs and Archons. So since the Protoss opponent's attack didn't deal enough damage for them to get ahead, I can just kind of saturate my 3 bases with all the gases. I actually opted for 5 gases here. And then I can flood roaches. The roaches beat groups of adepts like this super easily, especially when roach speed kicks in and they can chase them down a little bit. And then this is kind of just the compilation of all the Protoss pressure moves not paying off enough, and then the swarm can just overwhelm the opponent. They are getting into immortal production, but this attack arrives before the first immortal is even out. When I saw this prism harassing, I created a new group to defend. So you see this first group is my hatcheries, the second group is my main army. This group here includes some queens, so this queen, I'm adding this queen, and the queen from the main is being pulled down. And then some new roaches that I'm making are being added to this group. Since this fight is already being won, I want to make sure my reinforcement units are dealing with the fight that I haven't quite yet won. So the prism could potentially warp in a bunch of DTs or adepts. If I create a new group with some queens and some roaches, the queens can threaten the warp prism and the roaches can deal with the adepts and DTs. If you're facing DTs, always make a couple extra overseers and take overlord speed. Overseers without overlord speed are slower than DTs by the move speed, so overlord speed makes them faster, they can chase them down and always keep detection for your army. It also allows you to dodge the stalkers that are trying to snipe the overseers. If they ever snipe your detection, they could just warp in a bunch of DTs and kill all your army if you keep attacking. An additional benefit of making a few extra overseers early on against DT is you can start contaminating the Protoss opponent. Contaminate isn't a very often used mechanic, but it can be a very strong one, especially when they have one really obvious, crucial counter production facility against you. So if you go to the Units tab, I have 17 roaches, 16 lings, so the most numerous attacking unit I have in the game is the Roach. This robo facility is the biggest threat to the success of my army, so I'm going to direct the majority of my contaminates to the robotics facility. Just kind of trying to spread out my army, deal damage wherever I can, keep the bases injected if possible, take a 4th base. This defense group is trying to deal with the prism. Having a spine and a spore here, a lot of times it just takes care of the threat on its own, and you don't have to pay attention to it. But then finishing off with a couple more contaminates. And that's dealing with Adept and DT Harassment in the early to mid game. And then leveraging your strength with Roach.